12-step recovery. Why? It's been proven to work by these authors' experience. So every other 12-step fellowship you may have come in contact with in your lifetime was all predicated on this original. And unlike any other book that's been written, this is the collective witness of the first 100. So the experience of freedom that they enjoyed is written down here. They talk about their coming to believe in power and the experience of what that is, and they talk precisely about what recovery feels like, what they did, what they experienced as a result, that kind of thing. Tonight we're in steps 8 and 9, so that's good news. We're in the fitness step, the freedom step. Anyone want to be free? So that's what we're all about, is new freedom, new happiness. We're going to be looking at page 76 of our books, those of you following along in a book. I always recommend that you follow along in a book. It's dangerous to let other people read your book for you. It's a book of experience. So if you let me read it for you, then you give me the power to think for you. So what I'm not going to do is tell you what the book says. What I'm going to do is show you how I find what it says to me and encourage you to have your experience with it. Fair enough? Now, it may sound like I'm telling you, but I'm not telling you. I'm telling you I'm not telling you. Okay? All right, so page 76, it says, now we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead. How many people in this room recognize that from another book? Okay, so we don't want to prejudice anyone, but that book was studied extensively before this book was written. And for the alcoholic, the reason we believe that faith without works is dead is because I'm in the process of coming to believe in a power greater than myself. I prove the power to me through me, because I get used as an instrument of that power as a servant as I go out and carry this message to other alcoholics and practice these principles in all my affairs, right? Because the goal of 12-step recovery is what? Yeah, to wake up. If you just think it's about fellowship, you might think it's freedom from alcohol or sobriety. That's a byproduct of waking up to who you really are and whose you are. Yeah? Okay. So it says that let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. Do you have such a list? Don got his in the 4th step. How many of you got a list like that when you did a 4th step? So those of you that are contemplating a 4th step, one of the reasons we do one is I'm not going to be a good witness to what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now without having taken inventory and finding out what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now. How many of you thought you were different than you were? As you've grown, you look back and go, wow, I was pretty sick. So that inventory helps us be proper witness, yeah? Okay, so it says we made it when we took inventory. The reason I call that to your attention is rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. So if we follow in order, when they say we, they're not talking about we, they're talking about the first 100. And a lot of times we'll hear opinions in the fellowship. It's not their fault, they just have opinions, but it has nothing to do with our program of recovery. And it can confuse, okay? So it says we subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. How many of you found your inventory to be drastic self-appraisal? How many of you looking forward to it are thinking, damn, that's drastic? So there's nothing wrong with assuming it's going to be drastic, but it's the path to freedom, right? All right, so now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris which is accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. If we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. So they're reminding us that willingness is not of us. Willingness is divine power. It's a really good idea for people to internalize that, because I hear some really abusive talk to newcomers in our fellowships saying, I'm not going to work with you, you're not willing. Well, of course not. You haven't shown them any love. Willingness is divine power. I love you as you are, and I have hope for you to become a better version of you in time. And because someone believes in you, you might make an effort to face some of those fears, and you just might surprise you and everybody else by how much different you can become when you start facing your fears and growing into that you that you should be, that you've always wanted to be. Yes? Okay. All right, so if we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. Remember, it was agreed at the beginning we'd go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. So who did we make that agreement with? We might have had someone with us, but power, right? I made an agreement with the power I encountered in 2. It was sensory power. Power, peace, happiness, sense of direction flowing into me, right? I may have been so numb that I didn't know it was happening, but the person who helped me with that said, that what you're feeling, that's the power, Joe. But then there was a process, right? And the process started to reveal the power to me through me in a sensory way, right? Okay. All right. So probably there are still some misgivings. How many of you got to an inventory, completed an inventory, still had some misgivings? Okay. Well, probably, right? Okay. As we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we have hurt, we may feel diffident about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. You know what they mean? It might be that. Or it might be, they hurt me just as bad as I hurt them. Or any number of reasons. I can't do that or it'll hurt them. Right? If I do that, I'm going to go to jail. How many of you have concluded if I don't do something to get out of my own way, I'm going to jail anyway? Okay. So that's when we start getting honest with ourselves, and then we can start doing better outside. So we're all going to feel a little squishy about it. It says, let us be reassured. To some people, we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. So how many of you don't want to go out and make the approach because you don't want to talk to them about your new spiritual program of action? Not too sure about talking to people about God yet. Not, right? Half of them are atheists or agnostics. They weren't even calling the power God. They were just damn glad to have met the power. Any of you just been damn glad to have met the power and don't give a shit what we call it? Whew! Things are better than they once was. Okay. Okay. So we don't want to worry about that right now because we might prejudice them. So we're now thinking of others first, right? At the moment, we're trying to put our lives in order, but this is not an end in itself. Our real purpose, how many of you felt like your life lacked purpose? How many of you have found, because of your addiction and your subsequent recovery, that there's been purpose found in what you thought was a waste, what you thought was suffering? Okay. So our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be a maximum service to God and the people about us. But first, I'm going to have to be humble enough to realize that God loves them as much as he loves me, and I have no more power to restore them than I had to restore me, but I am an instrument of that power, and I can introduce them if they wish. Make sense? So it says, it's seldom wise to approach an individual who still smarts from our injustice to him and announce that we've gone religious. Have you ever heard somebody that just got full of the Spirit and just started running around beating shit out of you with the Bible? And like, hold on there, Baba Louie. We're just getting to where we can sit still for a minute. So it's not a good, but if you do that, the only reason they know it's seldom wise is because to some extent we all do it. And if it's not the Bible, it's the big book. And if it's not that, it's whatever we know is recovery. We tell them what meeting they need to go to and damn near headlock them to get them there. So we all do some of that. It's our enthusiasm, but that's really not the best way they learned, right? The best way is kind of grow in the Spirit, sit there in non-judgment, wait for the Spirit to lead them to you. There's another book that tells you you can't do it, that the Father will lead them to you. Anyway, in the prize ring, this would be called leading with the chin. How many of you have had the experience of leading with the chin? Was it kind of a knockout? Why lay ourselves open to being branded fanatics or religious bores? So there's a question mark. Do I fear that? Am I afraid to give credit where credit's due, even though I agreed to in 3 because I don't want to be labeled? Because I hear it in the modern fellowship. Oh, that's too much God talk. I don't think there's enough God talk. If I'm honoring my 3rd step, I'm giving credit to him for everything. If I'm here today telling you what I did today to stay sober, I am lying either now or when I did my 1st step. Right? Okay. So we may kill a future opportunity to carry a beneficial message, but our man is sure to be impressed with a sincere desire to set right the wrong. How would the man know my sincerity? I'd ask instead of tell, and I'd ask him what would make it right instead of tell him what I was doing to make it right. Have you ever been told what you're going to listen to? I owe you some amends. Sit the fuck down. That's how it feels sometimes, huh? Yeah, no, right? We get a little zealous, man. He's going to be more interested in a demonstration of goodwill than in our talk of spiritual discoveries, right? Show me, don't tell me. That's the kind of people we are. Okay. We don't use this as an excuse for shying away from the subject of God. When it'll serve any good purpose, we're willing to announce our convictions with tact and common sense. Number one, how do we know it'll serve any good purpose? The Spirit will inform. Have you noticed that? Have you ever felt that overwhelming desire to just actually honor your third step and thought, oh, I don't know how this is going to go, but here goes. And what does tact and common sense mean? I don't have to over-dramatize the dramatic miracle that is my recovery. All I need to do is tell the story. If you knew me then, you know that me being here now, all these many years later, is absolutely a miracle. Because it should not have happened. But it did happen. Okay. So the question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. How many of you got one of those? How many of you got more than one of those? Do you see him in here? Did we check for weapons? It may be he's done us more harm than we've done him, and though we may have acquired a better attitude toward him, we're still not too keen about admitting our fault. So you got somebody like that now. I know we don't like the word hate, but it just means strongly dislike. But I think they did me more harm, so they can just wait. Anyone relate to what they're saying? Okay, well, they're going to give us some suggestions about what they found, because a lot of times the one we think we hate is the one that's going to give us the greatest freedom. We may still not be ready to approach them, but they're not dying of my hatred of them. I am. And so I may not be ready yet, because that's a tool I still want in my bag, but at least I need to start contemplating the freedom I would get from not carrying them around in my head. That's the other reason I wanted you to see if the guy you hate's in the room, because if he's not in the room, you brought him in here. You're carrying that baggage everywhere you go. Okay. All right, so nevertheless, with a person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. We got any farmers here? You know what they mean? What happens when the animal gets the bit in the teeth? You're going where the animal wants to go. So if they want to go to the barn, you're going to the barn. So they're not telling us to control people, but they are saying take control of the situation. Initiate the contact. Let's see what we can get done. Yes? It's harder to go to an enemy than to a friend. Why do they remind me of that? Because it's harder. But then look at the suggestion. But we find it much more beneficial to us. See, there's another book that suggests we have no enemies. And this book suggests we have no enemies. Because I suffer from my thoughts about what they did much longer than I do from what they did. Yeah? Okay. So we go to them in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret. So they gave us some instruction there, and it's subtle. What do I need to do to get to a helpful and forgiving spirit with a man I hate? I'm going to have to, they taught me how to pray and meditate in 4. I looked at what I hoped to be, what I wanted to grow into, the kind of man I hope to be. Now I'm going to have to go back to that same spirit that informed me about what I want to be, and I'm going to have to ask for power to be kinder than I feel. I'm going to be scared and I'm going to be mad. And I'm going to be pretty sure that they're going to humiliate me again like they humiliated me before. Any of you know what I'm talking about? But when I consult the Spirit and I'm empowered to go to them in a helpful and forgiving spirit, even if they reject me, I find that they no longer have the power to humiliate me. In fact, until I took ownership, it was me who humiliated me. But now I've cleaned up my side, and now they carry the burden, not me. Make sense? Okay. So under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. Why do you think they told us that? Any of you tried criticizing a person or arguing? How many of you had to go back and make amends for the amends you're trying to make? Simply, we tell them we'll never get over drinking until we've done our utmost to straighten out the past. I won't be able to say that with credibility until I believe it. So don't go trying to make amends simply because you think that's some thing to impress people. If you're not feeling it in the Spirit, do something you are feeling in the Spirit. That's why they lay the book out the way they do, to the wife, to the family, to the employer. Get a circle of support around you. As you grow in the Spirit, you'll want to disarm from worldly tools like hate and revenge and distrust, and you'll want to start growing in spiritual tools like love and patience and tolerance and kindness. Make sense? And until you're comfortable to let down the old tools, you're not going to pick up the new tools because your hands are too damn full. Right? So we're there to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so, never trying to tell him what he should do. His faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. Did you notice how they said the same thing many times? Do you think that's how many times they stumbled over it? See, I'm not going to be fit to go to that attic scene, to that person really imprisoned with depth and weight, until I can tell them, I once thought and felt as you do, but I doubt that I would have made much progress had I not taken action. You will notice I walked in and I will be walking out. I can show you how that happens. Without having to tell them you shouldn't or you, right? Because who the fuck cares what I think they should or should not do? Right? Okay. So there's a promise to this. If his faults are not discussed, we stick to our own. If our manner is calm, frank, and open, we will be gratified with the results. So what does it mean for your manner to be calm? Have you ever appeared calm when you did not feel calm? What is that but a power greater than you operating through you? What does frank mean? Direct. Not going to try and spin it to my advantage. This is what I did. You did not deserve that. What can I do to make it right? Open. What's that? How many of you have made an approach for an amends and they had something you did not remember? Drinkers, come on. They got lots of shit we don't remember. So I've got to be open to whatever else they have, because I'm not there trying to check to make sure the truth of their story. If they believe I've caused them harm, I'm here to make restitution for whatever harm they believe I may have caused. Okay? Someone probably caused them that harm, even if it wasn't me. How many of you have been harmed in recovery? Went to a room, people treated you bad. So let us first apologize to you for harms you've suffered at the hands of people who are not spiritually discerning. And second, I would say, don't be that guy. How would you like to be approached if the roles were reversed? Grow into that man or woman. We need more of you. Okay? So in 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Sometimes the man we're calling upon admits his own fault, so feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. They use this word rarely only a few times in this book, and I've heard great debates about what rarely means. I would suggest to you, for our purposes, rarely means rarely. It's not a meaningful debate. Don't happen often. Often my perspective is not real good, and when I grow a little beyond it, I see that what I thought was not what it was something else. Then I go back, oh, rarely. Okay. So our former enemies sometimes praise what we're doing and wish us well. How many of you have had that happen? Anyone go out to make some amends? That's kind of interesting, huh? Occasionally they'll offer assistance. It should not matter, however, if someone does throw us out of his office. We've made our demonstration, done our part. It's water over the dam. So the first thing for people to get is this isn't a book of rules. They're suggesting what I might want to do based on what they did and what they experienced. So I'm showing you that's what they said, but that isn't necessarily what you should do. You should, if you read this book like it's your book, then you'll want to take their suggestions. But I don't read this book so I can make sure you behave right. I read this book because if I do what they said, it won't matter to me how you behave, and I can be an effective servant. So the book is always written to guarantee my spiritual experience. I have no power to guarantee yours. So if I want to get fit enough to deliver this power with depth and weight, then I need to go make my demonstration regardless of how you receive it. And then I need to take how you receive it with humility and go away. I can hold my head high, but you may not respond in the way I would hope. How many of you have gone to make amends and did not get the response you wanted? How many of you have requested to make amends and were turned down? Okay. That doesn't mean I'm not obligated if they want to hear it in the future, but for now, I've made my demonstration. I've done my part. It's water over the dam. Let's go. Right? Okay. So, most alcoholics owe money. Why is that so funny? Y'all didn't come in here with a pocket full of money? These guys are masters of understatement, aren't they? Okay. We do not dodge our creditors. How'd they learn that? Because they dodge their creditors. How many of you have been sober years, perhaps, and are finally prosecuting your amends? So don't be dogging on other people, because we do it when we do it. And sometimes our stature in life does not elevate to the point that we got a whole lot to share, and God gives us the grace to have distance. Right? And when it's time, it's time. Okay. Telling them what we're trying to do. We make no bones about our drinking. They usually know it anyway, whether we think so or not. How many of you had that little discovery? When you finally admitted your addiction, it was finally unanimous. Oh, thank God he knows. So, we don't want to be afraid of disclosing our alcoholism on the theory that my disclosure will cause financial harm. That does not mean don't tell them if it did cause them financial harm. They have a right to know that I know that my drinking caused you financial harm. You didn't deserve that. Tell me what I can do to make it right, and there's usually a pay, right? Okay. And then by the same token, running around telling everyone you're alcoholic will cause you financial harm. It's unnecessary. They don't give a shit, and it might cause you not to get a job. So if it's not a disclosure you need to make, don't be silly. Now here, your alcoholism, your drug addiction, your incarceration, that's going to get you a job. That's not everywhere. And not active, please. Okay. Okay, arranging the deal we can, we let these people, what did I do now? Oh, nor are we afraid of disclosing our alcoholism and the theory it may cause financial harm. Approached in this way, the most ruthless creditor will sometimes surprise us. Arranging the best deal we can, we let these people know we're sorry. So how would I let them know? Whatever they ask, right? Show up with something. Okay. Our drinking has made us slow to pay. We must lose our fear of creditors no matter how far we have to go, for we're liable to drink if we're afraid to face them. So they're talking about their experience. How many of you got, it will. Work with people. One of the things you learn about making of amends is the big amends is working with others. And the more people you work with, the more they're going to drive you through your steps, because the one thing we do not want to be is a hypocrite. So perhaps we've committed a criminal offense. Perhaps. I'm sure no one in here. Which might land us in jail if it were known to the authorities. We may be short in our accounts and unable to make good. We have already admitted this in confidence to another person, but we're sure we would be imprisoned or lose our job if it were known. Any of you ever had that fear? Any of you ever allow it to stop you from growing? Did any of you lose your job or face prison as a result? So what I'm trying to avoid, I will confront eventually. Okay. So the reason we admitted it in confidence to somebody is to get a flow of the Spirit and know the tangible presence of God on our lives. And we know that even if I do face prison or I do lose my job, God has a better job, or he has a message he wants me to carry in prison. And I know people in this room that did it. So Jeff's here tonight. He's not always here, but he's here tonight. He came in this meeting right out of detox, started chairing the meeting years ago, went and did 5. Now he's out, and he's still carrying the message. Any of you ran into him? They called him Coach in there. But there's lots that have had that experience, in this room especially. We may be short in our accounts and unable to make good. We've already admitted this in confidence to another person, but we're sure we'd be imprisoned or lose our job if it were known. Maybe it's only a petty offense, such as padding the expense account. Most of us have done that sort of thing. Maybe we're divorced and have remarried but haven't kept up the alimony to number 1. She's indignant about it and has a warrant out for our arrest. That's a common form of trouble too. So they went to generalities about the kind of problems us humans might have. Please don't focus on any one problem, because it's not about a problem. We spend too much time in modern fellowship worshiping problems and not the solution. We got a multitude of problems, one solution. Right? And the solution's not the steps, and it's not the fellowship. The solution is the power we encounter that allows us to walk free in the world. Right? Okay. So, although these reparations take innumerable forms, what's that mean? They just said to you what I just said to you. Whatever problems you got, we got a solution. And the neat thing about this solution is we don't expect you to take it on faith. You ask for a demonstration, we'll give you a demonstration. You will feel it. When you do, I'll know. I'll say, that's the power we call God. You want to improve that? And well, fuck yeah. I'm a junkie. I want to improve that. Give me more. Don't read the book, do what it says. The more of what you do about what it says, sharing yourself with others, you're going to grow. And you're going to feel the flow. Yeah? Okay? So there are some general principles which we find guiding. Reminding ourselves that we've decided to go to any length to find a spiritual experience. But you know, that's what sometimes if you hang out in just fellowship, you'll think you're willing to go to any lengths to not pick up, no matter what. And that doesn't take any power. It takes 0 power to not do. Please help people understand that. We're not here to not do. We're here to serve, right? So we're going to any lengths to find a spiritual experience, and it better be tangible, right? What did they tell? They compared this experience of this power with electrical theory and how we don't fully understand electrical theory, but we've experienced its effects. Any of you ever been shocked? No one had to convince you electricity was real, right? So they say the same thing about the tangible effects of this power we call God. We want you to have those tangible effects and then improve consciousness of them. Share them with others, okay? So we ask that we be given strength and direction to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences may be. That's power to overcome fear. I'm asking for power to overcome fear. Yes? How many of you faced fear and then had to go face your problems, and your problems either melted away or you were empowered to walk through them, or something, or some combination? So did you not receive power when you asked? No one has to prove to us the power of God. We're living examples, right? We may lose our position or reputation or face jail, but we are willing. We have to be. We must not shrink at anything. Usually, however, other people are involved. So now they're going to tell us about this mysterious others, except when to do so would injure them or others. And I've heard people over the years pontificate that you are others. That's a lie. You've already got a column. You're you. Others are over here. We're going to tell you specifically what others are. Quit lying to people about, you don't need a pass to duck your spiritual growth. Either duck it or grow. You alone bear the consequence of it. Usually, however, other people are involved. Therefore, we're not to be the hasty and foolish martyr who would needlessly sacrifice others to save himself from the alcoholic pit. A man we know had remarried. Because of resentment and drinking, he'd not paid alimony to his first wife. She was furious. So they told us he had a first wife. Hold on to that thought. That sort of leads me to believe there may be another. right? Okay. But the first one's furious. Some of you are like, oh, they're talking about mine. Okay. She went to court and got an order for his arrest. He had commenced our way of life, had secured a position, and was getting his head above water. So our way of life is this program described in this book. He had probably started attending fellowship, right? And he was probably working at a job, probably not a very good job, but a job. And he was starting to see the light of day. And then the letter comes from the first wife saying, you owe me. He wasn't happy. Okay? It would have been impressive heroics if he'd walked up to the judge and said, here I am. So they take you right to the thought life. That would be impressive heroics, wouldn't it? I'm willing to go to any lengths, judge, take me. But who are the others? The new employer, the new wife, the old wife. She ain't getting paid while I'm locked down either. Right? So there's all these others involved that I'm not thinking of because I'm thinking that doing this shows how serious I am, but that's impressive heroics. That's not spiritual at all. Does that make sense? That's why you might want to have a guide in this thing that you could run those thoughts by, and they might say, hey, let's see if we can avoid that and try this, and then if that's the consequence, so be it. Right? So we thought he ought to be willing to do that if necessary, but if he were in jail, he could provide nothing for either family. So now they've spelled it out clearly for us. Right? We suggested he write his first wife, admitting his faults and asking forgiveness. He did, and he also sent a small amount of money. He told her what he would try and do in the future. He said he was perfectly willing to go to jail if she insisted. Which of that list of things do you think was most important for her? Everyone has an opinion, and first of all, he didn't come in and tell her how it was her fault, and he didn't come in and tell her about all the difficulties, but it probably was changed behavior to say, look, I owe you the money, and that wasn't right. Here's some money. Here's my plan for the future, and I did none of this to keep you from following through on what you want to do. If you want to go ahead and have me incarcerated, I'm okay with that too. Now the others, the family, the employer had to be told of this decision because if she did insist, they would have been affected. So he would have consulted with them. Does that make sense? So those are the others, very clearly, that we've got to consult. We may not get their agreement, and then we'll have to come up with a plan that we can get agreement in. Yes? Okay. So, of course, she did not. And, of course, he did not know. Of course, she did not. Because he had fear that she was going to slam him down. Yeah? But that's not what happened because he was walking in grace. Yeah? And he was a demonstration of power, and he probably freed her a little bit. Right? Okay. And the whole situation has long since been adjusted. Before taking drastic action which might implicate other people, we secure their consent. So now they're walking you back to what I just talked about. Talk to the people. Look, they might lock me down. I really feel like I need to do this. Do you understand what I need to do and why I need to do it, and are you with me? In case, things don't go well. If we have obtained permission, have consulted with others, ask God to help, and the drastic step is indicated, we must not shrink. Did you notice how they walked us through a step experience? Talk to another, talk to God, got confirmation, time to go. Better talk to God again. Just saying, look, right? Anybody ever had to do something you're afraid to do and had to check in with a little power within? That's all they're talking about. It's not a theology, it's a relationship. Lack of power is my dilemma, God. We're going to need a little help here. This brings to mind a story about one of our friends. While drinking, he accepted a sum of money from a bitterly hated business rival, giving him no receipt for it. Notice they said while drinking, because that's an important part of the story. We'll unwrap it for you. He subsequently denied having received the money and used the incident as the basis for discrediting the man. So a simple transaction, took some money from a guy he didn't really care about anyway, according to the story. And he was having a few drinks. How many of you have been entrusted with money for something, maybe to complete a job? and the job never got done, the materials never got bought. There's really no reason we want to give to where the money went. And so the resort is, fuck them. Dude never gave it to me. So that's what they're describing to you. That's what happened. It's a real simple thing, flowery language. This guy was one of the more religious members. As we read the rest of the story, you'll see he never was an AA guy so much as he was an Oxford guy. So his church family was as important to him as your home group is to you. More so, maybe. So as you read the rest of the story, you need to understand what happened to him as a result. He thus used his own wrongdoing as a means of destroying the reputation of another. In fact, his rival was ruined. His rival gave him a donation to the church fund, and you're about to find out that he spent the church money on booze and then said, Cat didn't give it to me. That's a bummer. That's going to be a hard one to spend on the Sunday, right? Better not go. So he felt he had done a wrong he could not possibly make right. So now you sort of can see why, right? Not only did I steal from him, but I stole from the church, and that's where I go, and yeah. So if he opened that old affair, he was afraid it would destroy the reputation of his partner, disgrace his family, and take away his means of livelihood. What right had he to involve those dependent upon him? Based on the principles we've learned, what right did he have? None without their permission, right? I have to secure their consent. So that's starting to get complex now, because I got to think of all the people I've harmed, because now this isn't just one or two, this is a whole congregation. Uh-oh. So let's see what else we got to do. How could he possibly make a public statement exonerating his rival? So he's going through the process of meditation. How can I do it? They put a question mark. They want to show you how to go inward. Eyesight without insight, spiritual blindness. I'm not going to have any idea how to make this right without consulting the Spirit. And so, said after consulting with his wife and partner, he came to the conclusion it was better to take those risks than stand before his Creator guilty of such ruinous slander. He saw that he had to place the outcome in God's hands, or he'd soon start drinking again. And all would be lost anyhow. So he attended church for the first time in many years, and after the sermon, he quietly got up and made an explanation. Think about how hard that would be. How many of you have stolen the seventh tradition at some point? Any of you have to go back to the group? Were you surprised how they weren't surprised? Anyway, we think we're pretty clever, especially in addiction. Anyway, like only one other hand went up. I want you to know. Some of you I know are lying. I can't be me and one other cat. Can't be me and Robert are the only ones that ever stole it out of the can. Right? Okay. We stole in the church fund too, I'll bet. Robert. Whatever it takes. Okay. So anyway, it says this all happened. Today he's one of the most trusted citizens of the town. It met widespread approval. So what we're trying to paint a picture for you so you get it is the thief of the church fund, the town drunk, became the most trusted citizen of the town through the power of God. But he had to participate in the plan. He had to go take ownership of his acts. Does it make sense? Sound like a sermon? It was intended to. Okay. All right. This all happened years ago. The chances are that we have domestic troubles. They're assuming anyone has a domestic left, but if you had a domestic, did you have domestic troubles? Yeah? How many of you didn't have a domestic, but you still had domestic troubles? All right. Perhaps we're mixed up with women in a fashion we wouldn't care to have advertised. We doubt if in this respect alcoholics are fundamentally much worse than other people. But drinking does complicate sex relations in the home. Where's my meth addicts? Sex relations get complicated. Depending on which home, huh? As long as I didn't go to mine, it worked out just fine. Okay. After a few years with an alcoholic, a wife gets worn out, resentful, and uncommunicative. How many of you notice that? Worn out, resentful, uncommunicative. They don't stop there. That's what we see, but it's reflecting how I'm thinking and feeling. They want me to go inward now and see what's going on. How could she be anything else? Given what's been happening here, how could anyone be anything else? Does it make sense? That's why they got a chapter to the why, what it looks like to have me come home to somebody over a period of time. Yeah. So the husband begins to feel lonely, sorry for himself. Now they're talking to us, worn out, resentful, uncommunicative, situation not rectified, and now here I am sober and shit. Ain't nobody honoring me. Anyone relate to that? I got to go to my meetings. You do the dishes. He commences to look around the nightclubs for their equivalent for something besides liquor. Any of you ever seen that happen? Sean goes to the strip joint. How many of you found him at the fellowship hall? Wherever. I mean, we're looking for ease and comfort in the world. And we shouldn't be surprised if we haven't learned the trick that ease and comfort is found within, for people like me to not have to go out in the world to get it, because I do destructive things when I do that. See, if you're an addict of the hopeless variety and no one has introduced you to the power within you, they've cheated you out of your recovery. That's what we want to do here. Whatever, if you're feeling anything tonight, you're not feeling me, you're feeling a power within you. It's recognizing what's happening, its depth and weight. We want to improve that for you so that you get your ease and comfort from within instead of out there. And that's what the freedom step, the fitness step's about, freedom from the bondage of self. I got to get free of me so I'm free to be me. That guy I want to be, not versus the guy I end up being by accident sometimes, yeah? Okay, perhaps he's having a secret and exciting affair with a girl who understands. How many of you have met him or her? That understanding one. Thank God for the understanding ones. They can fix me, right? Or I can fix them. I'm sure there's a fix here somewhere. Know what I mean? In fairness, we must say that she may understand, but what are we going to do about a thing like that? So really, if I'm trying to get free, their understanding is really not the issue anyway. It's about who do I want to be, and how am I going to get there, and how am I going to outgrow that limiting thought about myself that keeps me from becoming the version of myself I want to be. Okay? So a man so involved often feels very remorseful at times, especially if he's married to a loyal and courageous girl who's literally gone through hell for him. So now they're talking about the spiritual warfare within us. I'm behaving one way, and I have a way I want to behave, but I'm not manifesting action that shows that's the way I want to behave, and I damn sure don't want to demonstrate what I'm thinking of them by the way I'm acting, but that's the only conclusion they can reach. And now I don't like me, and you know what I mean? So they're talking about that head to heart, that spiritual warfare that happens in every human, whether you believe or don't believe, that's what happens in us, and they're describing it. When I'm not being the best version of me, and I desperately want to be. Okay, so whatever the situation, we usually have to do something about it. Why? Because I cannot stay in a battle zone for very long without picking up a weapon. If we're sure our wife does not know, should we tell her? So now we're back to question marks. Everyone have an opinion? Okay, so let's deconstruct. If we're sure, how sure are you? How sure were you that they didn't know about your addiction? Were you correct? We're not trying to convince you, but the only one that knows is you and the Spirit within you. And so you got to ask yourself, have my actions indicated that I'm not being totally faithful in this house, even if it makes sense? And then you can make up your own mind. Not always, we think, if she knows in a general way that we've been wild, should we tell her in detail? Another question. That was definitive. How many of you got more detail than you wanted? So we know it might be harmful to them to go into detail, because once they get, have you ever gotten detail? Ooh, that's hard to get rid of that picture, huh? Undoubtedly, we should admit the ponies and the midgets and stuff. Feathers, leathers, you know. She, you know what I mean. She may insist on knowing all the particulars. She'll want to know who the woman is and where she is. And then they start talking about, we feel we ought to say that we have no right to involve another person. Look at the words they use. They use the words they mean the words they say. Just because I feel I should do something doesn't mean I'm empowered to do it or not do it. So they're going to tell you what I should do, and I know what I should do, and then what I'm going to do when I do what I want to do anyway, or what I can't stop from doing, right? And they're going to walk us through that experience, but remember, they learned it by their mistakes, and then they wrote down what would have been a better path based on their experience. So it says, we're sorry for what we've done, and God willing, it shall not be repeated. More than that we cannot do. We have no right to go further. Though there may be justifiable exceptions, right? So it's none of my business. If the Spirit tells you to tell them in detail, then tell them in detail. If the Spirit tells you to hold back, hold back. There may be justifiable exceptions based on your relationship. I don't know your relationship. This is not about your relationship even with me or with them or with someone else. This is about your relationship with God. How comfortable are you with talking to the Creator of all, the one that's restored you to this point, and saying, I'm good? Because you're the only one that can answer that. Right? All right, so though there may be justifiable exceptions, and though we wish to lay down no rule of any sort, we've often found this the best course to take. What I learned is when I spilled the beans about who I was with and why I was with them, it did harm that I didn't intend to do. And it caused anger towards another person, and so it's a destructive way to live. That doesn't mean I had any more power to do or not do. It just means I learned what they learned, and it's better to consult the Spirit before I have difficult conversations. Yes? And then hopefully, when I start having troubling thoughts, I'll consult the Spirit and learn to discipline my thought life, and that won't be repeated. But I haven't woke up completely yet, but that's the whole point of 10 and 11 and 12 is walking in an awakened state where I'm consulting the Spirit instead of being driven by desire. I'm showing my dependence on divine power. Right? Okay. So our design for living is not a one-way street. It's as good for the wife as for the husband. If we can forget, so can she. I recommend you not spill that little secret. Let them discover that little tidbit on their own. They may not find it as insightful as you do. It's better, however, that one does not needlessly name a person upon whom she can vent jealousy. So they're telling you that their experience is the same one I just told you of with my own personal experience. Why we want to be empowered in the Spirit we're withholding information for their good, not ours, right? Okay, so perhaps there are some cases where the utmost frankness is demanded. So they're going back to that. It may be that this is just, we have to have 100% honesty. We're going nowhere if we don't. So you already know, so here's what went down. Right? That's between you and God. All right. No outsider can appraise such an intimate situation. They apparently think it's between you and God. Right? It may be that both will decide the way of good sense and loving kindness is to let bygones be bygones. Each might pray about it, having the other one's happiness uppermost in mind. So they're giving us a suggestion about useful prayer. If you're enjoined in a relationship you want to preserve and you've had that issue, then you might want to do that in prayer. Bind yourselves together. Let whatever will make them happy come before my desires, that type of thing. They're just giving us some ideas. Keep it always in sight that we're dealing with that most terrible human emotion, jealousy. Good generalship may decide that the problem be attacked on the flank rather than risk face-to-face combat. So they talk a little flowery back then, but all they're saying is no one wants to be told how they should think and feel. So what you want to do is just demonstrate the attitude of a servant, and eventually they're going to notice a change in you, and when you do, you can talk to them about the change and let them feel how they feel, because they're going to anyway. Right? Okay. So if we have no such complication, there is plenty we should do at home. Uh-oh. Sometimes we hear an alcoholic say the only thing he needs to do is keep sober. How many of you have heard that? How many of you have heard it this week? Or said it yourself? You ever heard that mantra? How are you? Well, at least I'm sober. Not for long, based on my experience. You're wasting valuable high time, Bubba. You either find someone to talk to or get to drinking, baby. People don't like that, but you know what? If they don't believe they need it, we're suggested to tell them, look, man, go try some controlled drinking. You'll be all right. slam a little bump into you and, stop abruptly. Do it 2 or 3 times. Certainly he must keep sober, for there'll be no home if he doesn't, but he's yet a long way from making good to the wife or parents whom for years he has so shockingly treated. Passing all understanding is the patience mothers and wives have had with alcoholics. Had this not been so, many of us would have no homes today, would perhaps be dead. So is it true? Did any of you stop using in the midst of your addiction and have some clean time and then return to your addiction? So was alcoholism or drugs really the real problem? How many of you have been stone cold sober, remain stone cold sober, but were also stone cold miserable? How many of you found out there's a manner of living that can free us from that misery by simply learning to get rid of that bondage of self? You don't have to be an addict to know what it's like to live inside the prison of a mind that continually attacks. Any of you ever felt like you didn't belong somewhere? Any of you felt less than? That's not possible in a society of equals, right? So we need to get you free, right? Okay, so the alcoholic is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. Hearts are broken, sweet relationships are dead. Affections have been uprooted. Selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. We feel a man is unthinking when he says sobriety is enough. Can you see why they say that now? Because it is. It's crazy. I had sobriety. I tore it all down. So sobriety was never enough. How many of you can remember in your addiction running out? Abstinent. Pleasant, right? Searching the floor for crumbles of the ceiling. He's like the farmer who came out of his cyclone cellar to find his home ruined. To his wife, he remarked, "Don't see anything the matter here, Ma. Ain't it grand the wind stopped blowing?" Yes, there's a long period of reconstruction ahead, and we must take the lead. So the path is this reconstructive path. It's going to require the resurrections of dead relationships. How many of you have stayed on the path long enough that relationships you thought dead have been resurrected? And we say we don't believe in God. Silly. Who can raise from the dead? There's a book that says somebody can. How many of you felt like you're a dead person walking around, empty shell? Damn sure was a revival for me, right? All right, so a remorseful mumbling that we're sorry won't fill the bill at all. We ought to sit down with the family and frankly analyze the past as we now see it, being very careful not to criticize them. Their defects may be glaring, but the chances are their own actions are partly responsible. So we clean house with the family, asking each morning in meditation that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindness, and love. Guys, that's a prayer we don't really talk to people about in recovery. But if my Creator, capital C, shows me throughout my day the way of patience, kindness, tolerance, love, when I see it, I'm experiencing it. Because that's how the world works. It reflects how I'm thinking and feeling. It doesn't cause it. And it's also a good bumper for when I'm not feeling kindly, tolerant, loving, there's something wrong with my spiritual status. I've fallen asleep to who I am. Make sense? So that's a good prayer to add into your disciplines. And those of you that are going home to families, remember families like that you were the screw up, and they'd like to keep you there. So if anyone else have to return to a family and you weren't playing the role, and they're like, wait a minute, all the problems are them. But now there's still problems and know them. So not faulting them, I'm just saying if you're going to go back, you don't go back to save them. You get well and they'll follow you out. Because we follow God and they follow man. That's how that works. Okay, so the spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. There's a mantra in the fellowship. Work it because you're worth it. The authors say, stop the chance, live it. Quit reading the book, quoting the book, spitting the book. Do what it says. Yeah? And then you'll know. Okay. Unless one's family expresses a desire to live on spiritual principles, we think we ought not urge them. Why? Because nobody wants to hear about, they want to see it. They want to see the miracle and ask you, right? Take away my difficulties that victory over them may bear witness. When my difficulties go away, which was my difficult personality, among other things, eventually they're curious. And then I can tell them about the God that restores even a wretch like me. We should not talk incessantly to them about spiritual matters. They will change in time. I urge you to grasp that promise. Don't talk to them about spiritual matters. Walk in your walk. Hold your head high. Help your brother and sister. They will change in time. Our behavior will convince them more than our words. We must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness would make a skeptic out of anyone. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would right them if we could. Some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter, and there may be a valid reason for postponement in some cases, but we don't delay if it can be avoided. This is always a conversation with me and the power within me. It's not an opinion of somebody else. My sponsor telling me, you need to do this. I know they're loving, but that's not what never tell them what they should do. Their faults are not discussed. This is my fitness step. I'm never going to be good in the addict scene talking to them without pouring my fear on them until I know who I am, whose I am, and who sent me to them so I can tell them who they are. And the one that we should be worshiping here, not the problem, but the solution, will make himself known. We should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. Now, following that is what a lot of people call the promises. They're really the 9-step promises. I'm not going to go through that tonight because I'm going to start next week with that because there's a question that leads into 10 with that. But I will tell you a story about the people who can't be seen. Some of you have been around a long time. I know some of you here tonight knew old Black Wally. Years ago in Phoenix, there was a guy by the name of Black Wally. He ran around on the south side, and he told you the reason we call me Black Wally is I don't want you to confuse me with all the white Wallies out there. He said a lot of things, but one thing he did is he always served. And so I would go and hang out with him, and when I couldn't find anyone to go to max security and do meetings with me, Wally would go. Even with his bad asthma and what have you, he'd go in. Anyway, I kind of went off the rails for a while, and I always, every once in a while, had a thought, I really need to go back and make amends to Wally because, he really took me under his wing and things didn't go the way I'd hoped. Well, anyway, turns out Wally passed before I made my way back to be able to do that, and so he was on a list of things I needed to do, and anyway, it was a matter of a prayer and what have you. But one day, without really giving it any thought, to be truthful, it was on a list and then I forgot about it. One day, I'm in a courtyard at a halfway house and I'm doing a 4th step with a young man, and as I'm writing down all his stuff, I come to find out I'm sitting with Wally's grandson. Some of you felt that. That's the power we serve. So we don't worry about them if we can honestly say to ourselves that we would do it if we can, because God's got a way of working it out. And next week we'll look at 10 and 11. Thanks.